Just Run by LongTemple. Chapter 1. The Day I Crossed the Line. I didn't start the day intending to disappear. Flip was already gone by then, locked behind concrete and steel, unreachable except through memory, letters, and the way his voice still lived in my head when I needed it least and most. The city went on without him, loud and indifferent, but I moved through it with the awareness that something essential was missing. The morning felt trustworthy, light slipping through the blinds, routine holding its shape. Clear was 6 years old enough to lace her own shoes without asking, old enough to argue back, old enough to be enrolled in Catholic school, uniform pressed, shoes polished, backpack heavier than it needed to be. Old enough to remember who showed up. That mattered. By early afternoon, my thoughts had begun to loosen, not in a way anyone else could see. Just enough space between intention and action for something unnecessary to enter. I was alone when it happened, alone enough to believe I could manage it. The first hit wasn't my idea. It came through a companion, someone familiar, someone who spoke about it like a suggestion instead of a threshold. They didn't push. That's what made it dangerous. They framed it as controlled, temporary. "You don't have to," they said. "It's just once." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I was desperate, not because I wanted escape, because a sharp, arrogant part of me believed I could witness the experience without being altered. That I could observe it like a study, like data. The first hit didn't feel reckless. It felt precise. My chest loosened. The edge between my thoughts softened. My mind moved ahead of my body and left it behind like an afterthought. For a moment, longer than I will ever admit, I wasn't grieving. I wasn't anticipating the next obligation. I wasn't missing Flip. That was when I heard him, not as a voice, as posture, as memory, as the way he used to look at me when I tried to outthink my own safety. "You're too smart to be this dumb, Run." The thought didn't stop me, it just hovered, waiting. Flip had been an addict long before I ever touched the thing that would almost take me. Heroin, beer, liquor. That slow erasure disguised as survival. I spent years trying to pull him back, angry, relentless, convinced that if I yelled loud enough, he would hear me over the hunger. "You're never going to hit bottom," I used to scream at him, "because you keep landing on me." I meant it literally. I broke his falls, covered his messes, held space where consequences should have lived. I thought love meant catching him before the ground did. I thought I was being strong. I didn't understand then that I was teaching him how far he could fall. Flip used to look at me when I talked like that, half defiant, half tired, like he knew something I didn't yet. Like he understood that bottoms aren't measured by how low you go, but by whether anyone is left underneath you. That knowledge came back to me the first time I got high, not as guilt, as math. I knew immediately what made my situation different. Flip had me. I had no one to land on. That was the terror. The paranoia followed soon after, not loudly, not chaotically. It arranged itself with care. The walls leaned in, the quiet thickened, as if it were listening back. Sounds felt intentional. I checked the door, then the window, then my reflection. I looked calm, studious, almost impressed with myself. That frightened me more than panic would have. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I was in control. I told myself this was temporary. And that was the problem. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't frantic. I was disciplined, semi-reclusive, focused. I had money stashed, enough to disappear without spectacle. Enough to avoid chaos, avoid people, avoid the world I watched from a distance. I understood chemistry, ratios, timing. I wasn't just getting high. I was engineering a way to stay high without being seen. I was mapping isolation as safety. Like the saying goes, 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. I understood that truth immediately. And still, I kept going. What finally broke through wasn't fear of overdose. It wasn't even fear of death. It was the knowledge that when I hit bottom, it wouldn't bruise me. It would break me. Because Flip had landed on me. And there was no one left for me to land on. Every calculation ended with clear. 6 years old, watchful, already old enough to read silence. I could survive almost anything, but I could not survive destroying her quietly. Getting help meant leaving. Leaving meant absence. Absence meant trusting Muffin with a child I had spent my life shielding from her kind of love. Love that favored loudly and punished without apology. Flip, locked away, powerless, was still the one pressing me toward the truth. You don't get to waste what you know, his presence insisted. Don't be stupid with your life. I didn't call Dion. I went to see her. Lillian Wald rose the way it always had, concrete stacked against the sky, indifferent to confession. I found Dion in the small park in front of her building. Zain was a year old then, heavy-limbed and curious, sitting in his stroller with a snack crushed into one fist, his eyes tracking pigeons like they were miracles. He looked up at me and smiled. That nearly broke me. I stood there longer than I meant to, trying to find my voice, while Dion watched me closely, too closely. She already knew something was wrong. Mothers recognize fracture. When I finally spoke, my voice came out low, unsteady, a whisper I didn't trust. I need help, I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Dion didn't answer. She didn't rush me. She waited. I need to leave, I continued, my throat tightening around every syllable. Not for a day, not for a break. My hands were shaking. I tucked them into my sleeves, ashamed of how visible everything suddenly was. I can't take Clear with me, I said, barely above breath. And I can't go unless I know she's safe. The sentence collapsed in on itself. I hadn't planned to cry, but my body didn't consult me. I know what I'm asking, I whispered. I know it's not small. I looked at Zain, at his sturdy little legs, at the way his whole world still fit inside a stroller. I'm asking you to watch my heart while I go somewhere I don't know how to survive yet. The silence stretched, painful, necessary. Dion reached out, not to hug me, not to fix it, but to steady me by the elbow, firm and present. I've got her, she said, not loudly, not ceremonially. I've got Clear. Something inside me gave way, not relief exactly, but permission. I nodded because I couldn't speak, because if I spoke again I might beg, and begging would have undone me. I cried later, alone, not because I was weak, but because sacrifice rarely feels brave while you're inside it. Sometimes it feels like tearing yourself in half and calling it love. That night I packed light, not because I didn't have things, but because I didn't know which version of myself was allowed to come with me. I kissed Clear longer than usual, inhaled her, memorized the weight of her breath. I told myself I was doing this for her. What I didn't know yet was that I was also doing it because of her, because loving someone that deeply eventually forces you to stop running in the wrong direction. The next morning, I walked out sober enough to understand what I was leaving, and high enough to know I couldn't stay. That was the day I crossed the line. and the day I chose not to disappear.